How's it going, everybody? My name is Zane Martinez. We're going to talk about sensitivity analysis and capital budgeting. On the agenda today, we'll talk about capital budgeting, sensitivity analysis, the quantitative and qualitative steps involved in sensitivity analysis, and then the risk analysis involved in deciding whether or not the opportunity makes sense. Capital budgeting. Capital budgeting process comes in 6 steps here: identifying the opportunity, collecting information, deciding if the opportunity is a good business move, preparing finances, implementation, and then monitoring the process. It's important to realize that capital budgeting process is a dynamic process. This isn't a one-size-fit-all process where you input all the variables and it generates an output that is just constant over time. You need to make sure that all of the inputs in the capital budgeting process are timely and accurate, and they need to be constantly updated. The what may be true today might not be true tomorrow, as well as might not have been true yesterday. Over here on the right, you can see this is a planned capital expenditure. So the goal of any organization is to generate capital, and through the capital budgeting process, that allows decision makers to decide whether or not an opportunity is the right choice for them. Planned investment projects, and then funded by debt and equity. Um, Next slide. Sensitivity analysis is an analytical tool used to determine the most likely outcome by systematically changing key variables surrounding a particular subject, for example, capital budgeting. Quite simply, sensitivity analysis is an analytical tool used to input multiple variables, both quantitative and qualitative, in order to generate an output and allow decision makers to make informed decisions. 10 steps here: identifying the objective, defining the variables, determining the range, selecting the model, setting a baseline for values, running the analysis, visualizing the results, interpreting the findings, scenario analysis, and then those will all allow you to make informed decisions. When we're looking at different variables, we're looking at quantitative and qualitative. Both of those steps, quantitative steps, look like defining the model, identifying inputs, defining the range, running the model, and then analyzing the results. After analyzing the results, you'll be able to decide whether or not you can make a decision. A good question I look at here is the opportunity going to be profitable for the organization? The qualitative steps are defining your goal, identifying variables, qualitative variables, assessing the risk, and then determining the impact. A good question I ask here is the opportunity reliable, and does it make sense for the organization? After that, we'll be able to analyze risk in relation to capital budgeting. We break down risk into 3 broad categories: known unknowns, knowable unknowns, and then unknown unknowns. A couple examples of known unknowns are market fluctuation, technological failures, and then election results. Added that last one in because obviously this is an election year, and even though we know that a policymaker might implement some change, we don't know exactly what impacts those might have on our organization or the project as a whole. Market fluctuation is a good example, or not good example. We know that the market is going to fluctuate. However, we don't know how much, and we don't know exactly how that will affect, once again, the opportunity on the organization. Knowable unknowns: market demand, impacts of policy change, and then performance. And then unknowable unknowns. The goal for knowable unknowns is to try to make as many knowable unknowns known unknowns through the use of analytical tools. And then the third category here is the unknowable unknowns, such as the global pandemic that we experienced in 2020, natural disasters, and then market crashes. Market crashes are a little bit different than market fluctuation. Even though we know that the market's going to fluctuate, a market crash is pretty, it's unknown how drastic that might be and the effects that it's going to have on the organization or the opportunity as a whole. We're going to go into conclusion here. The first thing, I break this down into 4 steps. Okay, defining your goal or deciding whether or not an opportunity is available, using sensitivity analysis to determine the feasibility of those goals using quantitative and qualitative variables, making an informed decision, and then constantly monitoring after implementation. I will reassert here that the steps involved in this are it's not a one size fit all. Everything needs to be monitored over time. All the inputs and all the variables need to be accurate. They need to be up to date, and then the monitoring that occurs is constant as well. The majority of decision makers know that, but once you implement something, it's not just implement it and then forget. It's ensuring that you implement it and then you make sure that over time it's successful. That concludes this slide deck. If you have any questions, please refer to any of the references on the final slide right here.